My name is Rebecca Rodriguez Brown, and I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a caterer, and I'm a survivor advocate for human trafficking and domestic violence.
My name is Ariane Pauls Garcia. I am a wife, a mother, a student, and an advocate in my community.
Hi, I'm Bouvier Chides.
My name is Jamelia Hines. I am a survivor. I am an advocate. I am a mother.
My name is Dominique Brown, and I'm a mother, a newly fiance, and a victim advocate.
My name is Joycelyn Jones. I am a mother. I am a survivor and an advocate for victims of sexual abuse and sexual assault within the church.
I came to know Made for Them as I lived next door to them when they just got into the office next to the brick house on L Street.
I came to know about Made for Them through a mutual acquaintance after I came out of my trafficking situation.
I came to know Made for Them in 2015 through my mentor, who was a mutual friend to the organization.
I came to know Made for Them in 2014 through a mutual friend.
I came in contact with Made for Them for the first time when I applied for their open case manager position in July of 2017. I worked as a case manager for Made for Them from July of 2017 until May of 2018. As a case manager, it was my job and responsibility to provide each of our survivors with an individualized case plan, set micro and macro goals for them to achieve throughout their treatment, and most importantly, to help them rehabilitate themselves and re-enter into society post-treatment.
I expect them to deliver exactly what they told me and promised me, and that was services for counseling, for therapy. It was so that I can get the necessary tools to live out every day without the grief, without the stress, without the crying at night, and having to worry about if I am in a struggle that I know who I can turn to.
When I first encountered Made for Them and learned from their director, Andrea Shabaglian, my expectations were that I would learn about what had happened to me, I would receive healing, I would receive support, I would receive community, and I would, above most all, feel safe and supported.
My expectations was to join a program to help me get myself back together and, live a normal life, get back into the workforce and better my life as a whole.
I was expecting everything that was spoken on about Made for Them and what Made for Them has shared countless times, not just with me, but also with the donors, to create a safe place, to create a place where survivors could start a healing process, to create services that will better the lives of survivor. And my expectations was to be a part of that. And that's why I gladly accepted the title of Survivor Coordinator, because it helped me, gave me the avenue to create the first Survivor Circle, because that was something strongly on my heart, to meet other survivors like me, or to even have a similar story, so I didn't feel so alone. That is one thing that I can say was granted to me by Made for Them.
So my expectations of Made for Them at that time was to receive some kind of services, some kind of support with expungement of my record.
So when I first started working with Made for Them, my expectation of the organization was to fulfill the promises that were listed in their mission statement. I was told that basically we were going to change the world. We were going to change the worldview for survivors to heal, empower, and employ. I was told that we would have trauma-informed treatment services available for survivors of human trafficking, adults and youth, as well as their children. So it was my expectation that we would fulfill those goals and have some fully rehabilitated survivors at the end of the process.
With Made for Them, I can say probably more than likely the only service I can really actually say we had was our Survivor Circle. That was an ongoing thing that actually was upheld the entire time. We had counselors that was coming in from everywhere. Almost every week it was a different counselor, so I can't say we actually had a permanent counselor to talk to.
During my time with Made for Them, the services that I received were not well defined. I did not have a direct case manager. When I was given therapeutic services, the therapeutic services were provided by students in a program that were getting their credits to get their MSW, and once they got their required hours, they left, and I found myself having to re-explain my story numerous times to numerous students. So as far as direct services go, it was very inconsistent and unclear as to how it was supposed to work.
I received some trauma-informed services. I had a therapist for a little amount of time, which she was really, really great. Also, I did receive some job training during my stay there. And I did receive a lot of referral services too.
I will say the only services was, unfortunately, the ones I came up with. I created a resource binder for the survivors because I was tired of sitting there listening to the survivors calling in asking for diapers or asking for help with gas or help with rent or help with housing, and nothing was being done. All I kept hearing was, I will look into it, and nothing was ever done. No services was even to benefit us for the future. I didn't get any career training, and I think the only thing, if I'm being completely honest, the only thing that came out good and a blessing from Made for Them is the fact that I get to walk away with my survivor sisters.
While I was at Made for Them, some of the services I received were survivor group counseling, individual counseling briefly, and job training.
So unfortunately, throughout my time with Made for Them, I did come to realize that we did not have access to the services that we were listing and advertising that we had. As a case manager, a lot of the responsibility and the failures of the organization fell on my shoulders. I was the director of case management. I was the only case manager, and I held myself very much accountable, and I still do to this day, for the fallacies and inadequacies of Made for Them as a whole. We did not have access to therapeutic services. The survivors did not have access to trauma-informed care. I can specifically remember being able to connect them with programs such as equine therapy. That was something that was started and initiated. However, for reasons unknown to me, that one service was actually dissolved after just a few months. I am not aware of the survivors being connected or having access to therapy services such as psychiatrist, just a normal therapist. During my time with Made for Them, I personally never met another member of the staff who was trauma informed. I never had the opportunity to meet any members of Andrea's board unless it was at a fundraising event. So as far as services go, there was a huge lapse on our side to provide services for the survivors and especially for their children. I do know that we were meant to be an on-ramps for other avenues of help. However, it was brought to my attention and I was able to see and witness that a lot of the things that were donated to us, a lot of services that we did have access to, the survivors were not given ready access to those services or to those items. Far too often than I care to admit, we would have offices and storage facilities that were filled to the brim with donated items that were meant for survivors and their children, and I was expressly told that we were not to hand out those items to survivors, and we were not to engage in any kind of handouts, as she would call it, or freebies, despite the fact that they were things that were donated for survivors.
When asked to share my story, I was unprepared. It was kind of short notice. I was nervous, scared, because I've never done it and I was always afraid to do it. And she needed me to do it at the time. I kind of was a little bit of a nervous wreck afterwards. I ended up having to call one of my sisters because she didn't have any proper support for me thereafter.
While I was at Made for Them, I was asked to talk about what had happened to me. I was not prepared for that. I was not given any support. I was not given any forewarning. The director, Andrea, came up to me at the event after it had started and told me that the current speaker was not available and asked me if I would just go up and share. I shared things that I had never spoke out loud before. I had not, at that time, I was not receiving any therapeutic services. I had not even had my first meeting with a counselor at that time. And afterwards, there was no care, there was no support provided. I didn't even know anything about trauma-informed short storytelling until years after I left the organization. The support that I got afterwards to keep me from committing suicide was calling and leaning on another survivor to keep me out of that place.
She asked me if I would like to do a video, and I'm like, cool. And she said, we could just talk about, the check that you got and what Made for Them is doing for you at this time. And so I was like excited, like, cool, yeah, no problem. I had no idea about anything, but thinking that I could, share my story.
When it came to speaking about my story, I never received any trauma response from Made for Them. I still don't believe they're trained in trauma informed ways to handle a survivor, because there were plenty of times, I recall the time when I had to share my story for event Andrea was going to for donors, and I couldn't attend the event, so she had me write out my story, and I let her know that once again that when it comes to my story, I cannot write it. I can speak on it, but when I write it, it affects me in a whole different way. But I sat at that computer crying, not wanting to write my story, but I did it anyways because I wanted to help Made for Them.
So when I was asked by Made for Them to share my story, it actually happened the first time I met Andrea officially, from my mutual friend. We discussed on the phone, and she asked would I be willing to share my story on camera. And that was our first greeting initially, and I was terrified, and I'm a person of faith, and so was she, so we shared those qualities together. And so she kind of rephrased it as sharing my testimony, sharing how good God has been towards me.
The purpose of me being a part of this documentary, this movement of survivors, is to bring awareness to what is happening in the Central Valley, to the fact that we have survivors who are being re-victimized and re-traumatized by organizations that were set in place to heal, to empower, and employ. It was my mission to combat human trafficking by allowing women to have a safe space to speak their truth, to have a safe space for them to receive services and to be an on-ramps to other services and other organizations, and that is not something that took place within Made for Them. When it comes to the community leaders and individuals in power who are, maybe you're not standing in support of Made for Them, but you're also not speaking out against it either. And I would just say for you guys to just take a second, a deep breath, and imagine for 1 second that it was your daughter, your son, your sister, your mother, your brother, your uncle, who was victimized by another human being, having their body and their services sold without their permission, only to turn around and have the same thing done to them by someone else in a position of power who was supposed to help them. And I guarantee you, if you see it a little closer to home, you will understand the need to stand up and to hold Made for Them as a whole and any other organization that is not doing their part accountable for those actions.
For years, there have been conversations with and about Andrea in private spaces to address the concerns and allegations against her and the way Made for Them is being run. Despite those conversations, she has continued to demonstrate re-exploitive behaviors while working with victims. As recently as 2021, there have been public displays of how Made for Them does not have a trauma-informed approach as to how they interact with victims. This needs to stop. We need our community organizations to stand with us. We need our community partners to hear us and speak up publicly. We need public accountability to ensure the safety and future of all victims and survivors as they transition from a vulnerable place.
Community leaders and partners, one important question. Will you stand with us?
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 So, will you join us?